They told you that you were welcome, but when you walk in, you're the only elf standing there. It feels a bit weird as you look around. People are telling you to come on over and sit down, but you can't help but be a little bit on edge. Hi there, welcome to Psychology at the Table. I'm Dr. Megan Connell, and we are continuing our game hole conversations with some of my friends. I am honored today to be joined by Tanya DePass, and we're going to be talking about diversity in gaming and trying to be more inclusive at your gaming table. So welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
So tell me a little bit about what you do and the mission of your nonprofit.
So what I do is I try to get people in the industry, but also staying in the industry, because there's a lot of rate of attrition with people who get in and then it's uncomfortable, it's terrible, it's just as racist as other parts of tech, and they leave. I'm also doing more on the tabletop side because now I'm on a tabletop show, I'm GMing a show, and from my experiences, tabletop seems to be worse than video games, which I was surprised about, but not really. So the mission is to get people in, give them access, and get them to stay in and find a good place for them that's healthy and productive.
Awesome. So for game masters and dungeon masters out there who are wanting to make a more positive gaming experience for people who are, maybe minority race, or just for females sometimes too at the table, what are some steps that you would advise somebody to take to be more inclusive?
Show that you're inclusive, not just say that you're inclusive. So, if you own a game store, actually have people of color working in the store, have women working in the store. If someone comes in and they're new and they don't know where to find stuff, or if they're female presenting, have them be comfortable. Don't have the stereotypical dude that is very oh, can I help you, little lady, kind of thing. Because a lot of discomfort and seeing people like you. So if I walk into a game store, or if I walk into a game at a convention and I see no one like me, I'm not going to be comfortable. So a lot of these spaces are very predominantly white, male, they skew older. So getting more people, because there are a lot of young people playing D&D, playing tabletop. So getting those people access to come to conventions or welcoming them into your game store. So it's showing, not doing, or I'm just say doing, not just talking.
Yeah. And so being that welcoming, so ensuring that you're inviting people, and then also if you're running a game store or something, hiring people. If you're having events, maybe making sure you have a lot of diversity in your people running games and things like that. If you are running a game and you do have minorities at your table, or just new players of some kind, how would you recommend making sure that they feel welcome, to feeling like it's a safe place, that you don't make a bad experience for somebody?
First and foremost, let's skip the racism in the game, because, as a person of color, especially in this day and age, I get enough of that outside of the table, so I don't want to come to the table and, conflating fantasy races, etc., with racism is off-putting. I'm trying to think of a really good point that someone else made to me about this. And it's also, knowing that if, let's say, you were DMing a game and I was part of the group, your experience, you could not repackage racism in a way that would effectively make it work in a fantasy setting, would also be off-putting. So avoiding tropes like that, as a female player, avoiding rape as a mechanic.
Yes, please avoid that.
Please and thank you forever. Because Catherine Cross, a good friend of mine, talked about how she almost quit role-playing because a GM threw this in as a mechanic for her character and didn't discuss it with her. So,
oh my God.
Yeah, so consent is important. A session zero where you lay things out, what's okay, what's not okay. Having a mechanics table where someone can either say, no, this isn't okay, and also maybe a chance to kind of roll that back and talk about why they're not okay.
Yeah.
And being fine with people leaving your table if it's not a safe environment for them.
Yeah, and so but also I imagine with that too is the safety measures.
Exactly.
So veils and lines, the X card, Luxton methods, something like that, where you can pause and talk about what's going on. One of the things I want to kind of understand too, when we're talking about you don't want to repackage racism, is sometimes thinking of we have different we call them races in D&D, but it's species.
Correct.
Right? And so if you think normally a half orc if going into a predominantly human village probably wouldn't be necessarily get a warm welcome, because especially if that village is near where orcs raid a lot and things like that. Like, is that something still that's okay to have, or what would you advise people for?
I would think if people go along with, like, you know, like orcs and elves have a rivalry, that's fine. But if you always describe the orcs as like dark and menacing, or use things like coded language, that's when that line continues to blur between species and race.
Gotcha.
Because I get a lot of people, because orcs are coded as black people. This is like, people have talked about this, so it's not like I'm making it up or it's new. You know, and elves are always ethereal and light and flowy, except for the drow, and the drow are, that could be a whole hour conversation.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
But, you know, things like, hey, if we have a drow in the party, like, they're not automatically chaotic evil, or if you want to play one, we're going to sit down and have a conversation about race first.
Yeah.
Because while elves are a species, people play them as a race. People play orcs as a race, and they want to put those markers on the character because that's what they've been told to do. It's what they've always been told. That's how you play.
Right.
So being very clear in that, no, this is a species, or this is a class thing, versus classes in a rogue, a bard, not classes in socioeconomic.
Right.
And being clear with your players, and then being comfortable enough to go, you know, that's not okay. That's reinforcing a stereotype. I know you're doing it as an orc and it's not real, but if there's a person of color at the table, that could be very unwelcoming for them.
I imagine one of the things that might really help is having a very clearly defined world too. So like if you're going to be running into orcs or an elven village or something, to actually go, what are the customs? What do they do to be? I talk about this a lot, of like the idea of being intentional. Because when we are just kind of going on the fly, we go with kind of what we know. We go with the stereotypes, and that's where we get into trouble.
Definitely.
And so if we can be intentional and think about like what might the orc culture really look like?
Right. And, you know, we in our in the show that I'm on, Rivals, you know, we have a half orc that has given a lot of background into like what his life was like. And granted, he was raised thinking he was an elf, but still, we don't even get that insight to what we think elven or orcish culture is, because orcs are always portrayed as one way. They're portrayed as warlike, brutish, and again, coded language in the ways that a lot of times black people and non-human characters are interchangeable for some people. So I think that intentionality, and so if your GM spending that time, especially if you have a good mixed group at your table, and think about, oh, if I do this with an orc, or if I do this with a dwarf or something like that, that could be read a certain way, because even though it's a high fantasy setting, we're in 2018 playing this.
Right. Or 2019, whenever you watch this video. Right.
Or we're in the modern day.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that's really important. And it's good. I think one of the things, too, for game masters is having a group of people to be able to bounce ideas off of. So, like, having... I know, like, for Clinical Role, the game I DM, like, I talk a lot with other DMs about stuff when I have ideas for things. Say, what do you think about this? How do you think this might go? And
yeah, especially if you're newer to DMing and you're uncertain, whether it be about a plot point or be about, I want to introduce drow, but how can I do this in a sensitive manner and not have them fall into stereotypes? So I think collaborating with other GMs, or even, you know, if you know people either on Twitter or something like that, like finding ways to have that conversation. But it's hard because when you try to have a public conversation about sensitive topics in gaming, we've both seen how that can go very badly.
Yeah, that cannot go
so maybe like, hey, I've got a GM question. Is there someone I can DM about this?
Yeah.
And DM isn't a direct message
Which
on
is
Twitter.
I
was like, DM, GM. But is there someone I can talk to about this? I like, you know, or do you have a Slack or a Discord or something?
Yeah, there's a lot of Discord servers out there too for Dungeon Masters that can be helpful tools for just talking through things and making sure that we're not putting stuff in there that we didn't even think about.
Yeah, and also just being aware of your own privilege, your own lack of experience, because what the pushback I often get is, well, I'm not a racist, I'm not blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but it's unconscious bias, and realize that's a thing.
Yeah, I talk about culture like it's the water that we swim in, because the health of the water impacts the health of the fish.
Exactly.
Right, and so if we're in an unhealthy water, it's going to impact our behavior and how we see things.
Exactly.
So even if we don't want it to.
Or, you know, and also be aware that other players can pollute that water.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that could be helpful. Now, I think understanding just as we think about this stuff, it does change it, but to be intentional with the change. And then I think I always advocate, frequently checking in as well.
Oh, yeah.
And making sure
I think
things
communication is your best tool as a GM.
Most definitely. Would you recommend any particular resources or communities or guides for people wanting to learn more about inclusivity or how to be more inclusive in their games?
That's the hard part because there's not a lot.
Yeah.
Because what we do, we're doing more tabletop stuff with any diverse games. I would say reach out, find players of color that are GMing or active in the community. Dungeon Commander DC on Twitter is fantastic. They're GMing, they're writing up tabletop. Mad Pro, Ali Buston is also doing a lot of work. So Twitter, while it can be evil, can be a great tool. I would say, just use it as a stepping stone, or even just Google, because there is a Black Game Devs group and Black Game Devs site, but I think that's geared more toward video games.
Okay.
But I would just say, hey, are there people of color in the tabletop space? Or just Google like POC and tabletop and see what comes up, and kind of go from there. At least do the legwork first.
Yeah.
And then people can reach out to me too as well.
That's awesome. And how can they find you?
They can email me at Tanya@ineeddiversegames.org. We have Twitter, which is INeedDivGMS, and also you can find me on Twitter, on my personal Twitter, which is Cypher of Tyr, CYPHEROFTYR.
And then give a plug for your D&D game.
Yes, I'm on Rebels of Waterdeep, which is on the twitch.tv/DND Sundays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. noon.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming on. Excellent. Well, I hope this was helpful for you guys. And as always, let's make space at the table for everyone.